Hello, everyone. This is Noah and John. We are from UrbanDigs. We are talking Manhattan. John, we're going rentals today. We got the top dog. We got Gary Malin.
Bringing out the big guns.
Listen,
COO.
we have no choice, right? We got to go. We got to go big or go home.
That's right.
Always on this show. He's the COO at Corcoran. I've known Gary we go ways back. I know him a long time. So whenever I need an update on what's really going on out there, I bring him on. So Gary, without further ado, I know the rental market's got its challenges. I know vacancy rates are at high levels, but could you please specify where are those rates? What are rental trends, right, in terms of price trends, general market update, what's happening?
Sure. I mean, there's something we call the visible vacancy rate, which is what gets reported out there in the world, because we all know that the rental market isn't necessarily transparent, and it doesn't behoove any owner to really put out all of his or her vacancies. So they put out selectively what they want marketed publicly, but behind the scenes, we know there's a lot more availability. So the visible rate is a little over 5%. And just to put that into context, assuming that was the actual number, which it's not, during the Great Recession, it never got higher than 2.5%. So it's double what it was just from the visible rate.
Right.
However, a year ago, it was, barely above 1%. So what you're talking about is obviously a seismic shift in the vacancy rate here in the city, but the actual true vacancy rate is very likely about 20%. If you talk to any owner and understand what's going on with their portfolio and understanding what's going on with the marketplace, that's likely the number. Now, some have obviously done a better job at maintaining their vacancies, so those are going to be a little bit lower. Some are pressing forward with their pricing strategies, concession strategies, and their vacancies continue to rise. But I think a lot of them are just hoping for a better day, and they don't want to, quote unquote, give away the farm.
So this is unlisted inventory that's hard to track when you're tracking the 20% shadow of vacancy rate. Could you give any indication, like when the market was at 1% vacancy a year ago, what was that shadow rate potentially at?
It was probably not much higher than that, because the truth is there was such little inventory available. It made no sense to not expose your inventory to the marketplace. So it was very close to an equilibrium then. It could have been slightly higher, but not anything as drastic as we're seeing right now.
And what about prices? John, one quick about prices. Are prices down? Like I know.
Oh, yeah, prices are down tremendously. I would think that prices are probably down at least 20%. Not factoring in concessions, just gross to gross, you're probably talking close to 20%. And depending on where your last lease was, it could actually be down even further than 20%. If you were fortunate enough to get an above market deal, you're probably suffering a little more now than you otherwise would have.
Wow, that's interesting. So let me ask you this, Gary. I mean, with rental supply, shattering sort of, record highs, when do you see that trend changing?
There's so many variables at play. I certainly don't see 2021 going to be a very strong year for the rental market, because look what's going on right now with the virus. All we hear is about an uptick in the virus. The rates are rising in the city. I think some people are concerned there could be another shelter-in-place order coming down the pike if things don't get better. Hopefully we don't get there. And even if we land up getting there, hopefully real estate remains an essential business, because last time it wasn't an essential business. So if you're talking about going into the winter right now, which is historically the slowest time of the year for the rental market,
right,
even if it's the best rental market in the world, November, December, January is historically a good month, but February is, another big drop off because no one wants to look in the dead of the winter. If you just look ahead for the next 4 months, there's no reason to believe you're going to see any uptick. I was just on the phone before this call with a managing agent, a very large portfolio of properties here in the city. And he said last week was the slowest week he has seen since June. Now, the question is, was that election week related? People fearful there might be some violence, rioting, who's to say what will go on in the city? Or is it the fact that we're simply hitting a wall, that it's winter, that the virus has gone an uptick? People are saying to themselves, I haven't experienced the virus during winter, right? We were fortunate that when we left the city, it was getting into nicer weather. So there's a lot of variables at play, but the biggest one is the amount of inventory. If you speak with a lot of owners and you ask them what's going on with their portfolio, I could rent 5 apartments today, but they might have got 7 non-renewals tomorrow. So now you're net up 2, even though we rented 5 apartments. So the fundamentals really won't get better, in my view, until the city is truly the city, meaning you can go inside to have dinner. You can go inside to a bar and watch a game and hang out with your friends. The Broadway's open, the museums are open, sporting events. Like the real reasons why people live here, absent just the job related market situation, those things need to come back to justify people coming back in droves. Now, it isn't as though there isn't business going on. There's definitely business, there's definitely transactions. It's just not at the sort of pace and volume to absorb all of these listings. So I think we're in for hopefully a less bumpy road in 21, assuming there's no shutdowns. But there's just so much inventory that needs to work itself through the system before we can get to a stability standpoint.
Hey, Gary, where was that inventory in relation to the great financial crisis? We've surpassed that level?
Oh yeah, the amount of inventory on the market right now, we're not even close. I mean, as I said, like back then the vacancy rate was about 2.5%. So maybe it was higher, let's just say, because the visible rate and the actual rate didn't correspond as much back then either. So let's just say we wanted to double it for argument's sake. It was 5%. We're talking, the real one now is probably closer to 20%. So you're talking 4 times as much property on the marketplace now than there was at any point. And I've been in this business since 1998. I've never seen anything like this, obviously. No owner that I speak with has seen anything like this. And listen, it's really a matter of no one's seen a circumstance like this virus that has really, taken a hold of our city. But the one thing I think we should all hold tight to and believe in, that New York City is resilient. New York City will come back. People want to live here. People want to be here. It's just a matter of those extra items that make you really excited to live here, like the social life, need to start coming back to sort of get people to come back in droves. But listen, if you're a tenant, you should be thrilled right now if you want to live in the city, because you're getting the best deals you've seen in I don't know how long. So tenants really are in the driver's seat right now, and they should take advantage of that. And owners, listen, owners are smart. They want to fill their apartments. Are they happy where prices are? Are they happy where concessions are? Are they happy where incentives are? No. But the reality is you have to capitulate to the market, or your vacancies will just continue to grow and grow and grow. And then it's a problem that you're going to keep on facing.
Yeah, that's if could I dive into that for a second? If you could just take us into the world of what OPs are looking like right now, and how are they right now compared to the peak shutdown COVID era?
Listen, I don't think the concessions have gotten any better if you're an owner. I think that over half the deals we do have some form of concession on them, and that will trend up now that we're going into the next 3 or 4 months. Depending on who the owner is and depending on what his or her feeling about their portfolio is, will sort of determine how much they're giving. 1 month going all the way up to, I've seen 4 months free, plus paying the broker, plus offering moving expenses, plus giving free gyms, free Wi-Fi, you name it.
Plus the 20% discount.
What? Plus a 20% discount. Exactly right. I mean, listen, it is what it is. I mean, it's always about the law of supply and demand. Like I always tell, an owner, it's like, during normal circumstances, your tenant pool, you're swimming in the deep end of the pool. There's always a lot of tenants out there for you to draw from. So although maybe this tenant doesn't want your unit, there's likely a few people coming in behind this tenant in the next couple of days. Whereas now we're in the kiddie end of the pool and it's very shallow. So you got to really do your best once you have a tenant to get that tenant in, to get them the right incentive, to not let go of them. Because the truth is, what's really happening in this marketplace, which is different than ever before, is because of the rent law changes a few years back. I mean, not a few years back, a little over a year. The application fee is $20, right? Not $100. Right. So tenants are putting in 4 or 5 applications at a time. And they're not necessarily always concerned about what building they want to live in or what neighborhood they want to live in. They're concerned about who's going to give me the best possible deal. So they're negotiating against every owner. And there's always one owner that is likely going to be a little more aggressive than another. And these people will literally jump from a building to a different building, even if it's not where they want to live, for that extra incentive, whatever. And it might be very small, but to them, it's like, why not take advantage when I could take advantage?
Yeah. And, Hillel Fried said this, John, buyers and renters, they're great hunters right now. They're great hunters, and he's on the, he's boots on the ground, seeing it and dealing with this. Gary, you talk about all this inventory, and we see it out there. Is a lot of that unsold new development inventory that's now converting?
No. That trend is not really out there. I'm sure there's some of it out there, but the reality is this is just straight up rental product.
Wow.
And obviously, condo owners who own their own individual units that have had them as investment properties. It's not all of a sudden you're taking, these assets. The truth of the matter is, if you want to look at what's going on in the sales market is doing really well right now, comparatively speaking.
Yeah.
I think if you look at the sales market in comparison to the rental market, the sales market has long-time thinkers. They're thinking about, I'm getting a really good deal now. It's trading at 15, 20% below.
5 years, 7 years. Yeah.
I'm looking down the line, and I know that if a vaccine comes out soon, I know, regardless of who you wanted to vote for in the election, hopefully we're going to get that settled very soon. And there'll just be calmness in the marketplace, and the temperature level of our society will go down a little bit. I think buyers understand that with a vaccine, with the political landscape hopefully settled, that the long-term prognosis of New York City is great. And like everyone wants to buy low, right? However, a lot of people miss the low because they're waiting to get the last dollar. Right now, I think the fundamentals of the sales market have really shown that we're showing a nice upswing in volume and activity and price points. The rental market, because it's such a transient market, and you can come in at any time you want, and you can leave at any time you want, and you're not looking for an investment purpose, right? It's just a place to live. I think that people look at it differently, and I think that's why the volume numbers on the rental side have been so struggling, because listen, most people, if they left the city over the summer, it's because they didn't need to be in the city over the summer. Their offices weren't necessarily requiring them or needing them to come in. Why not live outside the city, spend some time outside, enjoy yourself? But listen, there's plenty of people coming back into the city. It's just not enough to offset the numbers of vacancies at the moment. But the reality is, long-term, we're good.
I think that's a fantastic point, Gary. And I'm curious, do you think that the sales market is sort of siphoning off any decent percentage of would-be renters?
Listen, if you look at what's going on in the sales market, the sub $2 million market, the sub $1 million market has been doing really, really well. As a percentage of the overall deals and transactions, it's a pretty strong deal. So the reality is, yes, there's definitely people out there who otherwise would have been in the rental market, whether it's parents buying for their children as investments, or people just buying because they look at the trade price and they say to themselves, look, I plan on living in the city for 5 to 7 years. This makes sense, especially at these transactions. So there's definitely a segment of the population that is buying versus renting, but I don't think it's a significant enough percentage, which really is driving the market. I just think that people don't get to enjoy the benefits of the city as much. So it's just a hard equilibrium. But the reality is, if you talk to people, they want to be here. And I think the news yesterday with Pfizer, I think it's giving people hope that, maybe 3-6 months down the line, we're going to be in a better position than we are right now.
Yeah, it's really such an amazing point. Gary, what would you tell those brokers that are meeting these resale renters, these condo and potentially co-op owners, I guess, even though less so, and they don't know what's going on out there. Like how does that broker breach that barrier real quick and just slap them in the face? What do they say?
I mean, look, you have to tell someone what they need to hear, not what they want to hear. And I think that if you're a broker that doesn't want to give the reality of the circumstances to someone you're talking to, you might buy the listing temporarily, but you're going to lose the listing because your credibility is going to go out the door. There's enough statistics, there's enough information, there's enough, proof of what's really going on out there. And it's like, you got to tell someone the truth and let them make a decision. Like, what is your best interest? I tell a lot of owners that I talk to, it's like, as much as they don't want to hear what I have to say, although they know what I'm going to say, the reality is you need to live to fight another year. This is one of those years, give or take, maybe a year and a half, whatever it is, where you're not going to be in control. You've had a really great run since the Great Recession. You've done extremely well. Unfortunately, all markets have cycles. This wasn't a cycle that anyone anticipated, of course, because of, the shock to the system, but it doesn't always shine, out there in the world. Every now and then it's going to rain. And when it rains, you have a choice. Like either you capitulate to the market, you get someone in your apartment, you get some revenue coming in, and then you live to fight a year or so when that lease is up. And if you're not willing to do that, then all you're going to do is chase the market down, because as your apartment sits longer and longer and longer, it becomes less valuable.
And I just want to say something, John. I mean, Gary, for all those people listening to this, Gary sits on top of this huge pile of data that nobody has access to, okay? And he sees all this data coming in, and the advice that he's telling you right now is such amazing advice. And Gary, if everyone listened to you the dynamics of the rental market would completely shift in a short period of time. 40%, 50% of that inventory would get off the market. Granted, not at a level that they want, but ultimately they're going to get there anyway because that's where the market is, and the whole dynamic would change.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I understand and respect where owners were coming from, coming out of the shelter in place order, where we were now allowed to get back into business, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you want to use your intuition and you say to yourself, we're in the summer, there's pent up demand, et cetera, et cetera. Why am I going to market now when I don't actually know what the market is? So the good thing about the rental market is you can mark to market within minutes, versus the sales market historically takes a little bit more time because people don't really react as quickly. So if you came out of that shutdown and you came into the summer season, I think there was a lot of hope that all this pent up demand would sort of be there, which it was, but in nowhere near the levels that people wanted it to be, number one.
Right.
And I don't think they anticipated as many non-renewals during that time as well. And then on top of all of that, then there was this psychology like, okay, the summer season's going to be delayed. Hiring's delayed. Everything's delayed. So maybe September, October, November will be our season. So a lot of owners will sort of convince themselves that the better times are coming. And the ones that took a little more realistic approach, or the ones that took a little more aggressive approach, listen, not every owner is created equal, right? There's new people that are highly leveraged. There's old people, old time owners that have owned their assets for many, many years that don't have that same pressure. And they could sort of make that decision really quickly and say to themselves, I got to stay ahead of this. So, everybody has a different agenda. Everybody has a different game plan. But I think there was a lot of variables at play if you're an owner that sort of might have convinced you of the wrong decision, and you ultimately are now potentially paying that price. Because listen, if you're giving away 3 or 4 months, okay, plus paying the broker, plus giving moving expenses, whatever the case is, ultimately from a qualification standpoint, those people aren't going to be living in your building when their lease is up. In the next 16 months, they can't afford to live there because typically they couldn't afford to live there now, but for all the great incentives that you're giving. So a lot of people need to not just think about what today's lease is going to be. It's also, what's the renewal world going to look like? And what sort of market am I going to be in then? And I think no one knows. Like, we don't know when the vaccine's coming out. We don't know how long it's going to take to get the vaccine widely distributed. It might come out in January, but it's going to go to those at risk first and frontline workers, and will eventually find its way to the rest of the population. And then there's be plenty of people who aren't going to want to take a vaccine right away. So there's so many things that none of us can really pinpoint to say what's going to change it. All you could do as a broker and all you could do as an owner is understand where you are now and make an intelligent, informed decision. Because if you hold on to hope, unfortunately in this market, it hasn't really paid off yet.
Yeah, you can hope all you want in one hand and you can crap in the other and see which gets filled first, Gary.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Listen, I understand that there's a lot of, sort of difficulties from owners depending on what circumstances they're in. Yeah. But you got to just understand the circumstances, and you got to say to yourself, your first loss in life is sometimes your best loss in life. If you marked to market a few months ago and you gave the market what it wanted, you likely would have done more deals. But instead, you went down $100 or $50 and you did 1 month instead of 2. And it's like this slow step down. And then you eventually find out like, wow, had I done this deal 3 or 4 months ago, it wouldn't have hurt as much. Because if you didn't want to give away a lot of money 2 months ago, but you didn't rent your apartment for 3 more months, aren't you in the same exact financial position? Yeah. You are. But it's a matter of understanding and sort of, like I said, like everyone has a philosophy about how to rent his or her properties. No one's right or no one's wrong. Because like I said, everyone's financials are different.
Yeah, well, it's a great point. I mean, you mentioned the uncertainty aspect. And, I think when you look at that, if you're a renter now, it makes a lot of sense to try to book the longest lease you can because the incentives are fantastic. And I'm curious, on the landlord side, are they trying to shrink those lease times to sort of compensate for the uncertainty, or are they looking to also sort of maximize the lease?
I mean, I don't think many owners are willing to do, long-term leases at this point. I think they feel they're giving away the house at the moment. They pretty much hope that in a year from now, we're going to be in a more stable market where they don't need to be locked into these long-term leases. So, there's definitely people out there that are doing 2-year leases, because if someone's a really good client and someone really wants to live in this building and you can amortize out these costs over the course of time, and you say to yourself, look, I'm never going to be able to fill 100% of my vacancies in a year from now right away. So if I have a certain percentage that have a longer tail, maybe it's not the best deal for me at that point. I'd rather be in that circumstance than have a 30% turnover in my building over a condensed 4-month time period.
Right. So it's basically, if you're a renter, now strike while the iron's hot, because this is the time.
John, I just want to say, really, I think, again, everything that you're saying, the conviction is high. I feel like for renters more than buyers, even on the commercial side too, man, if you could lock in a two-year or even a longer term rate right now, you're going to be very happy in 3-4 years time.
If you look at the commercial market, the sublease space that is out there is tremendous, and the discounts to current rents, are tremendous. Yeah. And you can get, if you could find a long-term sublease deal, there's instances where you could probably save 40%, if not more, on your current rent obligation. So, there's opportunity in the market. Everyone always loves to look at the negative, and everyone wants to look at how bad things are. And the reality is, markets are cyclical. This is a little more acute than most, but there's opportunity, whether it's in the retail front, whether it's in the office front, whether it's in the investment front, whether it's the sales or rental front. If you look at it like New York City is fundamentally a place people will want to be when this world goes back to sort of normalcy, then now is the opportunity to see what you can do to take advantage of that. Because listen, if I'm an owner, the minute things switch in my favor, I'm playing hardball.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. This has been amazing. John, I'm done. You got any questions for Gary?
No, I think my brain's exploding already.
I love it.
John, we can't afford that. We have enough other issues right now. We need your brain intact.
Squeeze it back in.
Noah's just the face guy. You're the brains behind the operation.
Oh, come on, Gary. I thought I was both.
I got to give Noah a little credit. I've known him longer.
Right. Thank you, Gary. That is Gary.
Guys, it was a pleasure.
Of course,
Thanks, Gary.
John Walkup. I am Noah Rosenblatt. We're from UrbanDigs. We're talking Manhattan, and we'll catch you next time.